Join our community by subscribing. Every click helps us share more stories like this one. The introduction. In a sleepy town surrounded by dense pine forests and winding creeks, life followed a predictable rhythm. The locals would greet each other with familiar nods, and children found adventure in the sprawling greens. But in the summer of 1998, this tranquil facade would be shattered. On an ordinary Tuesday morning, the sun bathed the town in golden light, casting long shadows as the residents began their route. Coffee shops buzzed with chatter, and the smell of freshly baked pastries filled the air. Banners were hung in preparation for the annual summer festival, and anticipation hung heavy. It was a typical day until the news broke that a young girl had gone missing. 12-year-old Lydia Sanders had vanished without a trace. She was last seen playing with her dog in the backyard, her laughter echoing through the neighborhood. When her parents realized she was missing, a feeble sense of dread began to creep in. Hours turned into a frantic search. Neighbors united with flashlights and trampled grass, calling her name into the echoing silence of the approaching night. As darkness fell like a shroud, the police were summoned. Officers combed through every inch of the area, interviewing anyone who might have seen something unusual. The searchlights pierced the surrounding woods, turning familiar paths into uncharted territory. Lydia's parents clutched each other, their heartbeats synchronized with the rising fear that something terrible had happened. By the time the sun rose again, casting light on the town's early morning dew, Lydia was still missing. A shadow loomed over the small community, where horrifying uncertainty gripped the hearts of those who had always felt safe. The search for Lydia Sanders was just beginning, and for one unsuspecting town, innocence would soon unravel. The victim. Lydia Sanders wasn't just another girl in town. She was a vibrant spark within her community. With her tousled chestnut hair and freckled cheeks, she radiated an energy that compelled others to gravitate toward her. Friends described her as adventurous and bubbly, often leading her small group on neighborhood excursions, from backyard treasure hunts to daring bike races down the slight incline of Maple Street. Born to loving parents, Lydia had always embraced life with an infectious enthusiasm. Psychology experts would later point to her background too devout, and supportive parents who encouraged her creativity and curiosity. She was an avid reader, often found curled up in the corner of the living room, lost in the worlds of fantasy novels or scrawling illustrations in her sketchbook. As the search for Lydia intensified, investigators learned more about her life leading up to that fateful day. Friends articulated their last memories of a picnic in the park, ice cream cones dribbling down their hands, secrets shared on a swing set as the sun dipped low in the sky. Those moments were now forever bittersweet. Amidst the frantic nature of the investigation, authorities tapped into Lydia's background. They spoke with teachers who described her as a sharp and driven student, always eager to lend a helping hand. She struggled occasionally with anxiety common for children her age, but it never stopped her from shining bright among her peers, earning her the fond nickname Sunshine. But the girl who had been a beacon in her community had now become an inexplicable disappearance. Anxiety rippled throughout the town as citizens grappled with their worst fears. Questions flooded in. Who could hurt such a lively child? And why? In the wake of Lydia's absence, the comfortable predictability of their small town surrendered to a menacing reality. A predator could be lurking among them, hidden behind the mask of everyday life. The crime scene. As the early summer sun rose over the pine-clad hills, a sense of urgency blanketed the town. Just past the edge of the Sanders property, a dense thicket of trees concealed a dark secret that, unbeknownst to everyone, was about to surface. Police officers scoured the area, a small team meticulously combing through the underbrush, hoping to uncover clues that would lead them to Lydia. The searchers moved in a line, occasionally stopping to investigate a broken branch or a furrowed patch of earth. Sweat mingled with the trepidation that filled the air, thick as fog. Each searcher made their way toward the tree line, where shadows hunched under the weight of growing dread. Voices dropped to whispers, the unspoken worry that Lydia's disappearance had malice buried within their minds. It was Officer Harris, a tenured investigator, who first noticed a jagged cut in the reinforced trunk of a particularly gnarled tree, almost hidden by layers of lush green. His heart raced as he gestured for his colleagues to gather. Kneeling, he pointed to the disturbance in the soil surrounding the tree's base, seemingly untouched by the chaotic search efforts. A faint, earthy smell wafted up, triggering a sensation that felt like ice poured down his spine. "Someone spent a considerable amount of time here," Harris said with an unsettling calmness. As the group hushed to silence, even the chirping birds seemed to hold their breath. It was a disturbing realization that their beloved community had become a backdrop for a potential crime scene. Adding to the disquiet, they discovered a pink hair ribbon caught on a thorny bush a few feet away, an unmistakable connection to Lydia. Officer Harris carefully collected it in an evidence bag, knowing the weight of their findings. The discarded accessory served as grim evidence of Lydia's last moments, a fragmented echo of her presence, tugging on the heartstrings of all who had gathered. As dusk approached, the search became less about finding a girl who had run away and more about confronting the harrowing truth. Something terrible had likely happened. An invisible line had been crossed, and the hunt for answers took on an ominous tone, plunging deeper into the unknown with each passing hour. The early investigation, in the days following Lydia's disappearance, the small-town police found themselves thrust into the complexities of a high-stakes investigation. The early morning meetings were punctuated by murmurs of uncertainty as officers recounted their findings. Maps were sprawled across the tabletop, marked with dotted lines and indicators of where calls had come in about Lydia's site. A palpable urgency hung in the air, each officer acutely aware that time was slipping away. Detective Eliza Carter, a diligent investigator with years of experience but new to child abduction cases, took the lead. She reminded her team post-haste, "We have to act fast. The first 48 hours are crucial." Her voice was steady, underscoring the gravity of the situation. Her gaze flickered across the faces of her colleagues, some visibly worn from lack of sleep, others with brows furrowed in concern. The detectives retraced Lydia's last known movements, scrutinizing the neighborhood. Every doorbell was rung, every neighbor questioned, and every recollection summoned in their quest for answers. Considerable focus was placed on the Sanders' immediate vicinity. Lingering suspicion raised over two unfamiliar vehicles parked nearby on the day she went missing. A neighbor, Mrs. Platt, offered details about a red pickup truck spotted late in the afternoon, its window tinted. its driver obscured. Lydia's friends were interviewed as well, providing small yet significant details about their conversations and the playful innocence of their time together just days before. What started as chatter about school projects soon morphed into lingering questions. Was there someone who seemed odd? Was anyone following them? As the investigation deepened, the tension intensified. Officers attended community meetings, encouraging townsfolk to report anything unusual. Their hearts heavy with the burden of uncertainty, the town's fear took on a life of its own, causing whispers of a potential predator to echo through the local diner and grocery store. Every shift carried the weight of hope and despair, the line between peace and peril blurring in the struggle to find Lydia. Time marched relentlessly forward, pressing heavily on the hearts of all involved, igniting a fervor to unravel the mystery that loomed like a storm on the horizon. The dead ends. Days turned into weeks, and the initial flurry of activity began to wane. The search parties that once roamed the nearby woods dwindled, leaving behind a mixed air of determination and hopelessness. Even as the community rallied together, any shred of optimism grew dimmer with each passing hour. The reality of Lydia's disappearance weighed heavily in the hearts of every resident, casting a long shadow over the town. Detective Eliza Carter found herself trapped in a cycle of dead ends. Tips poured in from an increasingly anxious public, some genuine, while others were baseless claims fueled by rumor and fear. A man in a striped shirt spotted loitering by the gas station, a report of strange noises emanating from a nearby fisherman's cabin. The leads ran cold, leaving the investigation in a stalemate. One particular tip had come from a call that twisted into confusion. A caller claimed to have seen Lydia walking home with an older man. A partial license plate number was relayed, and detectives sprang into action, only to discover the vehicle belonged to a local mechanic, well known and respected, who had simply offered Lydia directions when she became momentarily lost in the woods. Hours later, within the confines of the station's whitewashed walls, Detective Carter sat poring over the growing mountain of interviews and collected evidence. The ribbon found near the tree had been sent for analysis. Its connection to Lydia hoped to yield enough DNA to identify any potential suspects. But until then, she felt like she was grasping at shadows. As each day slipped through her fingers, the worry that had once ignited urgency morphed into a gnawing unease. Eliza pondered whether they had overlooked vital clues in their zealous effort to follow leads. The haunting realization lingered in her mind. Whatever had happened the day Lydia disappeared was concealed amid a plethora of distractions and scattered fragments. With mounting determination, she resolved to shift her approach. Rather than chasing leads haphazardly, she would dive deeper into Lydia's world. The answers might not lie in the woods or with strangers, but instead bloom among her friends, family, and perhaps the things they wish they had said or noticed before that fateful day. One thing was clear to Eliza: every detail mattered, for it was in those silent spaces that the truth often waited to be discovered. A break in the case. As the sweltering summer days dragged on, the investigation felt stagnant, yet Eliza Carter's resolve only deepened. Slowly, she began reconnecting with Lydia's friends, subtly encouraging them to relive memories, their laughter fading to apprehension as their stories unfolded. It was during these conversations that she sensed the unspoken fear swirling beneath the surface, a fear that perhaps they had more insights than they realized. One afternoon, Eliza met with Maya, Lydia's closest friend, at a small park that brimmed with childhood memories. The sun-drenched grass glowed, but the atmosphere felt heavy. As they settled onto a weathered bench, Maya stared into the distance, her fingers nervously twisting the bracelet Lydia had gifted her just days before. "Sometimes I think I saw someone near the edge of the woods," Maya said, her voice trembling. "It was different, like he was just watching us." The shift in her demeanor caught Eliza's attention, igniting a spark of hope within the detective. Prompted by curiosity, she pressed gently, "Can you describe?" Maya's brow furrowed as she recalled fragments: the low-slung cap, the faded blue hoodie, the way he seemed to blend into the background. He had been lurking just outside the playground, an ominous shadow amidst the innocent festivities. Eliza could see how difficult it was for Maya to articulate those feelings, the pain of guilt mingling with helplessness. With renewed determination, Eliza encouraged Maya to sketch what she remembered, hoping to get a clearer image of the stranger. The sketch captured a rough likeness to profile of a man who could be any one of them, yet felt completely alien. That evening, Eliza rushed back to the precinct, heart pounding with anticipation. With the sketch in hand, she organized a quick meeting with her team. They circulated the drawing to local establishments, asking patrons if they recognized the man. In response, a woman at the diner remembered seeing someone fitting that description, associated with a series of odd behaviors. In the weeks leading up to Lydia's disappearance, the breakthrough cascaded through the department like a blinding light piercing through fog. Eliza's team began gathering intel on individuals with similar descriptions, tracking them down with newfound urgency. As they delved deeper, they unearthed unsettling connections within the community. For the first time, the dread that had permeated the investigation started to morph into a focused sense of purpose. The pieces were beginning to fit, and for the first time in weeks, Eliza felt a flicker of hope bloom in the darkness of uncertainty. The road ahead might still be treacherous, but she was finally on the precipice of discovery, a step closer to uncovering the truth behind the chilling mystery of Lydia Sanders. The suspect. As the summer sunshine poured over the town in golden hues, the investigation shifted into high gear. Officer Carter's team tirelessly pursued leads related to the mysterious stranger Maya had described. They worked late into the evenings, combing through records, surveillance footage, and social media, driven by the urgency of finding Lydia and bringing her home. Weeks later, they stumbled upon a name that sent shivers down their spines. Nathaniel Cole, a recluse known for his erratic behavior and heavy social media presence. His profile painted a portrait of a troubled man, one who had been in and out of therapy, raising red flags with the local authorities over the years for stalking complaints. Detectives quickly learned that Nathaniel had been spotted near the park during the same time frame as Lydia's disappearance. It was pivotal evidence, but the team knew they had to tread carefully. Eliza coordinated a plan to gather intel while remaining discreet. They enlisted the help of a local informant who had casual ties to Nathaniel, in exchange for leniency on past indiscretion. Within days, they were attuned to his daily habits and routine, allowing them to infer his next move. Still, investigators were uneasy as past obscured his history, and his mental health records offered little insight into his potential culpability. An unmistakable tension enveloped the precinct as officers began surveilling Nathaniel's residence, a dimly lit cabin at the edge of town. Peeling paint clung to its weathered facade, hinting at a mind consumed by its own darkness. The stifled air felt thick with nervous anticipation as Eliza watched from a distance, her heart thudding with anxiety. Days passed with routine, checks unremarkable. Yet simmered. Then, one evening, as the sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the yard, Nathaniel emerged. Officers observed him as he meandered through a tangled garden, muttering to himself. Outwardly, he appeared disheveled, his clothes rumpled and eyes darting nervously. But that wasn't what caught their attention. It was the way he paused at the edge of the trees, a brief moment of stillness that exuded an unnerving familiarity. Determined to act, officers approached, carefully weighing their options. Cautious whispers exchanged between law enforcement, each weighing the importance of maintaining control without alerting. The ambient sounds of chirping birds gave way to him retreating into the shadows, as though something kept him tethered to that very spot. As they moved in, adrenaline coursing through their veins, Eliza felt both apprehensive and resolute. This was the moment they had been waiting for, the point at which the unknown would either shatter into truth or retreat further into darkness. But as they amassed the courage to confront the suspect, a single question hung heavy in their minds. Was this the man responsible for Lydia's disappearance, or merely a reflection of the unexplainable fear that had gripped their town? The trial. After months of unrelenting investigation, the small town of Maplewood found itself on the precipice of a pivotal moment. The search for Lydia Sanders had taken an agonizingly long road, culminating in the arrest of Nathaniel Cole, who had been charged with kidnapping and potential worse. The community, weary and worn, stood together, crushed by anxiety yet united in a collective hope that justice would prevail. The courthouse was packed on the day of Nathaniel's trial. Tension pressed against the air like a heavy curtain, and the faces of the locals reflected a tableau of emotions. Anger, sadness, dread, and the hope that this would finally bring closure. Eliza Carter took her place in the front row, her pulse racing as she prepared to witness the culmination of her months of relentless work. The opening statements were delivered, each side laying out its case with fervor. The prosecution painted a damning portrait of Nathaniel as a man whose history of erratic behavior and prior complaints from neighbors painted a clear picture of suspicion. They recounted his proximity to the park, the strange sketches he had drawn in notebooks, and the chilling witness testimonies that pointed to his habits of stalking. As the trial unfolded, the defense took a more perilous approach, seeking to dismantle the prosecution's narrative piece by piece. They argued Nathaniel's troubled mind was one of a misunderstood, reclusial, lonely man who barely resonated with the world outside his door. They portrayed him not as a monster, but as a victim of circumstance, a scapegoat for a grieving community desperate for answers. One by one, Key witnesses were called, nearby residents, friends of Lydia, and even her distraught parents. Each testimony reignited the pain of their loss, leaving the courtroom murmuring in sympathetic disbelief. Lydia's mother broke down on the stand, recounting the last days leading up to her daughter's disappearance, her sobs echoing through the courtroom, amplifying the heartache that enshrouded the proceedings. But pivotal evidence had been collected: pink hair ribbon, tested for DNA, which directly implicated Nathaniel. The prosecution presented the hard facts, linking him to the scene and rendering the courtroom silent, but for the rustle of papers. A cycle of uncertainty loomed with every expert analysis that was poured out, carrying the weight of the stakes. In the final days of the trial, tempers flared, and emotions reached boiling points. Nathaniel himself, having remained largely still throughout, stood up on the last day and interrupted the proceedings with an unexpected outburst filled with anguished pleas of his innocence. In that moment, a palpable shift swept through the courtroom. The anxiety of the townsfolk sharpened questions whirled, and dread permeated the air like smoke. Slowly, it became all too clear. The truth and the question of justice were not as easily discernible as it had once seemed. As the final jury deliberation began, the weight of unanswered questions lingered, leaving both hope and despair intertwined in the hearts of all. In the small town of Maplewood, the search for Lydia had morphed into a collective battle not just for justice, but for understanding in the face of overwhelming tragedy. The aftermath. The verdict came down like a hammer in the packed courtroom, echoing through the hearts of everyone present. Nathaniel Cole was found guilty on all counts. A wave of mixed emotions flooded through the attendees' relief, intertwined with the sadness that had settled long before his trial began. For many in Maplewood, the verdict marked the closure they sought, but the echoes of Lydia's disappearance lingered like ghostly whispers, haunting the corners of their souls. The weeks following the trial brought a sense of numbness to the town. Lydia remained missing, her laughter and spirit now just a memory of what could have been. As the headlines splashed Nathaniel's name across papers and social media, the story of the little girl who had vanished left an indelible mark on the community. People grieved not only for Lydia, but for their own shattered sense of security. Detective Eliza Carter, exhausted yet resolute, found herself reflecting on the past months. The countless nights spent chasing leads, the tension during interrogations, and the heartache of learning of Lydia's fate weighed heavily on her. While justice had been served, the question of what had ultimately happened to Lydia haunted her more than the shadows of fear that had characterized the investigation. In the wake of the trial, Eliza sought to assist Lydia's parents, forming alliances with local support groups and advocating for stronger search and recovery initiatives for missing children. Slowly, the community began to held holding vigils in Lydia's honor, establishing scholarships in her name, and channeling grief into action. But despite the outward efforts to commemorate her legacy, questions remained unmet, casting shadows in a town that had come to cherish the lost innocence of childhood. Days turned to weeks, and reality settled painfully into a new normal. While the townsfolk learned to trust each other again, lingering guilt harbored beneath the surface of their lives. Conversations often veered toward what might have been done, differently the signs they had missed, the fears they had silenced. But within this pain there glimmered a new awareness. The tragic events had opened their eyes, igniting a fire of vigilance in their hearts. Parents started attending safety workshops, Children were educated on recognizing their surroundings, and community involvement swelled with heightened urgency. Yet, for Eliza, the journey was far from over. With Nathaniel Cole heading to prison, her mind swirled with doubts regarding his connection to the case. The extent of his involvement in Lydia's fate remained unanswered, leaving an unsettling abyss that gnawed at her. As summer faded into autumn, Eliza stood at the edge of the woods where Lydia had last been seen. The trees whispered familiar tales, yet still bore witness to their community's heartache. Determined to find the truth, she dug deeper, resolute in her belief that somewhere amid the shadows lay the answers. One way or another, Eliza Carter would find a way to uncover the mystery that had forever altered their lives, not only for Lydia's sake, but for the entire town that loved her. Reflection. Seasons shifted in Maplewood, and the brisk winds of autumn swept through the trees, their leaves igniting in fiery colors before surrendering to the earth. As Detective Eliza Carter stared out her office window one chilly morning, she felt an ache grow within her own. Intertwined with a lingering sense of purpose and an ever-present yearning for resolution. Days turned into weeks post-trial, yet Eliza remained consumed by thoughts of Lydia Sanders. She often found herself revisiting the memories. The laughter of children playing, the light in Lydia's eyes, and the unblemished innocence that was cruelly taken too soon. In her heart, she had made a silent promise to ensure that Lydia's story lived on, to ensure that her life would serve as a catalyst for change, a reminder of the fragility of safety. A renewed sense of responsibility bore down on her shoulder. Eliza began working alongside local schools, establishing programs to educate children on safety, empowerment, and community vigilance, ensuring no one would ever have to endure the pain of uncertainty again. Together with Lydia's parents, she created initiatives honoring their daughter's spirit, turning loss into action. As the first snowflakes began to fall, the community gathered for a memorial service dedicated to Lydia, a somber yet beautiful gathering of remembrance. Eliza stood before them, feeling the weight of shared grief and newfound hope vigilantly intertwined. In that moment, she realized that this wasn't solely about solving a case. It was about healing, about coming together in love for a child taken too soon, and transforming pain into purpose. As the candles flickered in the dusk, illuminating faces marked by sorrow and resilience, Eliza knew the investigation would never truly end for her. The threads of involvement woven into the lives of all touched by Lydia's disappearance would forever bind them together. And in the shadows of uncertainty, the heart of a community had begun to shine a little brighter.